Okay, everyone. Thanks for coming to our next Lunch with Larry series on digital health. In this session, we're going to talk about sort of two aspects, the planning aspect of building regulated software, and also a discussion about using low-code in that application to try and improve our productivity as we're doing our authoring activities. So that's what the series is going to be about. Look forward to talking to you about it. Just a little bit about me. I have a slide here just to give you contact information. So if you want to, I'd be happy to facilitate any conversations inside of Siemens that you might be interested in, or to field any questions you might have. This is just my email address and telephone number. Feel free to give me a call. I also have a link here to our historical webinar location, which provides you with, I think we've been doing this series for 4 months now, and it gives you a whole bunch of background on a variety of different topics in and around our ventilator project. So if you want to take a look at that, there's a ton of really good content there. And of course, we have the URL to the right to register for this particular webinar series. So if you wanted to give this to someone else in the organization, thought it was valuable to them, that's how they get registered. So I appreciate that. And so we're just going to go ahead and drop into the discussion. The first thing I want to talk about is sort of the context of this overall series. And so when we're doing regulated software, there's a variety of different things we really need to consider. So there's regulatory compliance, we have a global supply chain, product development variability, cybersecurity. So there's a whole bunch of things that we need to consider. And a lot of these topics really are topics that are greater than just how do we develop software. So in a typical software development landscape, we might be doing task management, trying to drive activities with an agile development process. But what we want to be able to do is think about that in the context of a greater set of considerations, which is really the regulatory aspect of it. And so we're going to talk in the first session here about how is it that we develop these projects for maintaining and developing software, but also in the second session, we're going to talk more about the complexity that regulatory controls add to any product that you're making in the field. So I'm going to talk a little bit about just software design and then software planning. We're going to have both of those aspects. The first two sessions are really related to planning. Second two are going to be related to software design and authoring. So as I was saying a minute ago, typically when people think about software, they kind of think about medical devices as separate from software. And one of the things that we really want to start considering is medical device or software as a medical device is contained inside of this software development activity. And as we try to develop software, we have to be able to do is manage the software development activities across the margins of medical device. And it's really even more complicated than that, because when people are developing these different applications, oftentimes they're developing some applications that are software as a medical device and other applications that have other regulatory requirements. So financial planning is an example of that. And so in some cases, we have to have projects that are specifically designed to handle the financial piece, but maybe they interface with another piece of software that's really software as a medical device. And because of that, there's certain considerations that we're going to have to consider to allow us to have one project that has a certain setup and a data structure that's different than a different project, and how to relate those two together from a risk management perspective. So we really want to have a clear understanding of when we build out a risk management module for doing the development of the software as a medical device, how does that relate to the rest of the software, and how are we going to manage those things differently? So again, the sessions, first and second, are going to be on the planning aspect of it. Session 3 and 4 are going to be using Mendix to drive low-code development of that software. So we're going to, in session 3, we might have a surprise guest for this. So I may end up changing up session 3 a little bit, but the second 2 sessions are really going to be about productivity and how to drive low-code into our processes. This slide, just as a quick overview, is really what I'm trying to discuss here, is using a tool to manage all of the regulatory aspects, not only that, but cross-domain sort of development activities, doing system software or systems development, so model-based systems engineering, and how model-based systems engineering relates to the models. But today we're really going to talk about and try to get a foundation of is how to use these tools in a way to do Agile development. So under the line, when we talk about development of user stories and unit testing, source code management, defect management, there are usually lots of tools that people use in this. And one of the things that we really need to understand is how is it that Siemens would suggest that we do Agile development, and how does that interrelate with a lot of these tools that are standard tools that are out there being used. So I just wanted to sort of talk through that a little bit, and in our session next week, we're going to also layer into that the regulatory piece and how to integrate standards and norm traceability into these models. So with that being said, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch over to Maxim, and Max is our guest for the day. Let me just go ahead and assign and move this over. And Max is our Agile development specialist. He has really 12 years experience with Agile development work. Maybe Max, you could just introduce yourself and provide some context of your background for the audience.
Hello everybody, my name is Maxim Dam. So I've been with Siemens the last 4 years in a Polarian role, so I know the tool very well. And yeah, it's been 12 years when I first started off with Scrum. I've been in various industries, and it's been very fascinating seeing how it all grows and how more enterprise agile methodologies come along, and everything just gets bigger.
Well, okay, so we've prepped a few questions because there's some technical detail behind this, so I'm just going to go ahead and start with the first one. When you think of Agile software development, there's really, maybe you could give us the top 3 activities you believe are of most importance in software development planning for a tool like this.
Yeah, I have to say the first one is actually the planning itself. So how do you add things to your sprints, to your releases? A secondary is the reporting. How do we get all of that reporting live out there? And the third one is completeness. And let me walk you through this, how we designed Plan, like our the Siemens tool for agile development to accommodate all 3 of those. And we start off with planning. So here we are in our plan for version 1.0 of our release. We have several sprints going on. Some of them have already been completed. So sprint 1 and sprint 2 have been completed, have been crossed out. We have some work to do. We're about the halfway point here. We have burn-up charts that show us how the work is doing. And we have a cumulative flow diagram. But here on the right-hand side, we can actually add more user stories to both the release itself as well as the sprints from our backlog. But we can also prioritize those planned items right away. And I can show you really quickly over here how we do that. You just drag and drop them if you want to prioritize them. You see here's a detailed view. You see how the estimates and story points, how much you still have left. And by the way, this whole planning and prioritizing, it can also be automated. So if you have a weighted shortest job first and you fill out a few fields, Plan can automate the priority for you without you having to actually go in and manually do that. Now, number 2, I said reporting on the current status, the live status, and this is basically what this dashboard even does. So you always know it's a snapshot in real time of what work is done, but you can add to it. We have here Kanban board where you can just drag and drop the cards with the work. It's mostly user stories in here that you want to do. The interesting part here is that it still adheres to the workflow that you set it up to do. So if I want to reject it, I can't actually do this because there's some more there are some fields that need to be filled out. So you always have also the process underlying it and are assured that it's gonna be fulfilled. By the way, this whole Kanban board, we're gonna see more Kanban boards. They're highly configurable. We see a variant of it in a bit. And the third part that I wanted to show was the release completeness. And that's something that I think is very, very important, because you always need to know how far along you are, but also how much more you have to go. And this is a release report that has on top like some generic information: when's the feature free state, when's the code free state, but also a definition of done. And in this case, we see it's basically like a stoplight system: red, red, green, uh, red, green, yellow, and we have a lot of work to do. We only have 25% of our epics done, 34% of user stories. And the important part about those epics, user stories, and issues, that it's not only if they have been done, but also if we have accepted that they have been done. The secondary part in this definition of done that I think is highly valuable is the release verification and validation. So have we connected to our user stories and the tasks underneath the test cases to them? And have the test cases also been fulfilled? Maybe they found any blocker issue. We do not have any at the moment. And there's also the approval by quality assurance and by the product and release management for um, manual approval if the release has been completed.
That's great. So planning, reporting, and release completeness. So now that you've kind of talked about the things that you think are of primary importance, maybe we could do a little bit of a deeper dive on some of the dashboards and common reporting.
Yes. So the dashboards. Hi. The the dashboards that we have in Polarian are very widget based. So you can click and click into them and get them the way you want it, really just with a few click configurations. And this is our primary dashboard for the whole portfolio. We'll talk a bit about more when we come to save. But this collects a few different Kanban boards. One of them, by the way, is a different one where we have some shading of dependencies. So if you have dependencies between your, in this case, those are capabilities, it will be shaded red, and you can't actually continue the capability or feature or user story until the the capability has been completed, that the dependency is blocking. Now there's also progress, and I think this is very interesting, because here you can see where your progress is for some of the in this case capabilities, but this can also be an epic or a user story, and how far along you are. The red dots are the initial estimate that we thought at the beginning of it. And then the green is the actual work that's being done on it. And if we look at some of our completed ones, we see that we took 10% more time in the value of story points than initially estimated. So that's a great value point, both for figuring out where we are right now, but also in a retrospective way of what we might need to adjust to get our initial estimates closer to the actual truth. A different dashboard that I really like is the team statistics. So in here, we can see the different our different teams, agile teams that are working on, and the velocity to them. In Polarian, those reports can also be filtered. So we have here a filter that I can use to say, okay, I just want to see team alpha, and I apply it, and the velocity just shows me that directly for team alpha instead of all 4 teams that I was looking on prior to it. 2 more smaller reports that I think are great is the unplanned user story. So this is a very simple report that just shows you what user stories have been accepted but not actually yet planned in any release or in any sprint. So that's great for if you want to collect them and put them into sprints. Now the final one is testing. We have a great report that shows you the user story to test case coverage. So how many of your user stories have an actual test case? And we have a pie chart that shows us, yeah, we have some work to do. But what we also have here is directly the connection between the user story and the test case. So those would be a green one. And any defect that has actually failed. So if we open up, so we have the connection from the user story to the test case to the defect, and we can see exactly where the test case failed to generate that defect in which test step. The first test step was a pass, and then the secondary, it actually failed.
Fantastic. So, and I think one of the things that we talk about a lot is, what's the functionality that people use when they're doing Agile development work, and maybe you could start to discuss a little bit about some of these other frameworks like Scaled Agile framework, and what is the difference between a Scaled Agile framework deployment and something like what we're seeing here.
Yeah. So
when would they be used, right?
Yeah. So actually, you've seen both the Scaled Agile framework and the Agile template in here, but let me just open up here the Scaled Agile framework, and I'll take the question a few steps back. So what is the Scaled Agile framework? If you think about a normal Agile methodology, about normal Agile work, you have 8 to 12 people or working together on your app. You have an Agile team. You usually have sprints of 2 weeks, and you're just working on your own, on your small little development. Now, what happens if you have an actual really complex work that needs dozens or even hundreds of developers? You need to kind of scale this up. And that's exactly where the SAFe framework, the Scaled Agile framework, comes in. It gives you the governance and the ability to control and engage those different groups. There's concepts like Agile release train that are basically sprints for every couple of months, and it really there's a lot to it, but it basically gives you the enterprise Agile functionality, scaling it up, having everybody come together, working to a certain goal, because usually the software is not developed by 10 people anymore. It's usually hundreds of people together working to a singular goal, and that's why Siemens partnered with Scaled Agile. Scaled Agile framework is really the gold standard in this enterprise Agile world. And we are an official platform partner and always update our template to the current version. So the current SAFe version is 5.0. We have an official SAFe 5.0 template, and it's really great. I can't go into all the details of what is happening here, but I do want to mention, because you mentioned it earlier, that you want those projects to be cross project. Sometimes you have projects that are risk-based, sometimes they're not. That's exactly what the template enables as well. In this example, we have 4 teams working together towards 2 programs that are then in one portfolio. So we see all the data in this portfolio project that's coming from the teams and the programs, and we can we see all the KPIs. We see how much the user stories on the team level, the story points have been used up. We see really all the details on the portfolio level, and we don't have to go down. And if I go even into the backlog, I have here an impact tree that shows me from an epic how everything is interconnected, and you can see there are some capabilities, features, user story, tasks, but even further ahead, testing and defects and everything really that's happening across all those projects. There could be risks in there, there could be even more in there. So that's really a great way to see everything that's happening underneath the portfolio.
In terms of drinking our own champagne too, Siemens Teamcenter development uses this methodology, does it not? And the tools that we've developed?
Yes. So we have 5,000 users that are working with the SAFe Polarian template. And I think it's more than 120 Agile teams that are in this methodology. They're working towards different program streams. Polarian, Teamcenter, and X, they're all part of this.
So no question that it's scalable. So maybe we can finish the session out with some discussion about tools, typical tools that people in software development use. So of course, the tool includes functionality around build management, and maybe you could talk a little bit about a Jenkins integration.
Yeah, so with continuous integration, Polarian has an open API. So Jenkins is a standard that we support right out of the box. But if you're using any of the other CI/CD tools, you can either find an integration for that with Polarian Maven, so for example, or the APIs can support that. In this example that I brought here with me today, I'm starting a step back with the code that I've committed and traced to one of our tasks. This is in Subversion, but we support GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, and any standard Git as well. So it's really Subversion, Git, or Perforce, whatever you want to choose. You can trace that to Polarian, and then if you want to actually trigger the Jenkins build, what I really love about this is that you can automate this. So in here, I have an action trigger build. That's a status that's in the workflow. It triggers the build based on the actions that you put in, and it generates the build in here, but also you get the live view into Jenkins. You can see exactly what is happening in here. And if I refresh this, whenever the build actually finishes up, I will get the build ID in here. So there it is. So it's the information that flows from Polarian to Jenkins, but also back. And the build ID is here my super simple example. It can get complicated. You can get basically all the information that you need from the build back into Polarian. And part of that is, or rather, that could also be testing. So I have here a secondary example, and I'm just going to start the build here as well with the workflow, just because I want to talk a bit more, and the testing is going to take a bit more time. So what we have here is the testing overview, and I'm not going to go into the details yet. I think there are different webinars where we talk in detail about how we test in Polarian. But you can also do e-signatures, which is very important for medical devices, goals, test environment. There's a lot of it that can be filled out. And if we go back up, okay, we have a test run status failed. One of our test cases actually passed, but the other one failed. And in the details, we can see that we created a new defect, but also that we connected to a test case at the exact moment in time when it failed. So if I go in here, I mean, I have here the example of some class in Jenkins that failed, but if I go in there and change it around, maybe there's an extensive test case behind it, the defect would still be connected to the test case at that moment in time.
Yeah, that's terrific. There's one of the problems that large organizations who are doing this kind of development run into is a lot of times they grow through acquisition, and what we find is they have a whole bunch of different development platforms. You might have one division working on an Atlassian stack and another one working on a Microsoft stack. So we have a variety of different integrations, including Jenkins, to sort of tie all this together in a way that really makes a lot of sense for regulated product. And so maybe what you could also show us are some of the sort of common defect management tools. I know we have an integration with Jira or TFS, so maybe you could talk about that a little bit and how those integrations would work.
Yeah, so because Jira and both TFS and Azure DevOps are out-of-the-box integrations. They're very easy to integrate. They're bidirectional, so they move either from Polarian to Jira or Jira to Polarian and back. I have here the example of Jira, and if I reload this, we should get the defect that we just created back in here. Yeah, 1 minute ago, we had the interchange between those. But you can also create new bugs that just would go over digital health, and I'm just gonna create it. If we go back here into our defect, the defect should pop up. Here we go. Just created digital health. coming from Jira. You have the links. What you have to do is here's really just to map what you have in Jira and what you have in Polarian to each other. Any item in Jira or any item in Polarian can be mapped to each other, and you just have to go in and select which fields are relevant, description to description, maybe title to title. The TFS and Azure DevOps integration functions exactly the same way. So you can also select it. I didn't bring an example with me today, but we are on the official Visual Studio Azure DevOps in the pipeline for Azure DevOps. The integration is really out of the box and available, works the same way. And it's really, you can select it project by project. When I was talking earlier about SAFe, I mentioned that we have several Agile teams. Those teams can have a different defect management stack. Some might do it in Polarian, some might do it in TFS, Azure DevOps, and some might do it in Jira. And if I'm already on that marketplace, there's also a marketplace for Polarian where you can see the different extensions into different integrations, some that we didn't cover here, like LDRA for testing, but also those widgets, all of those reports that I showed earlier, they can be not only configured, but also extended by downloading a new widget, a new pie chart, a new graph, something far more complicated. And there are also templates like the SAFe template in here available as well.
Well, fantastic. So I'm having a little trouble transferring my screen back. Maybe while I'm talking, you can make me the displayer. But so great discussion. This is obviously a short pass, a light touch on Agile development, but Siemens is committed to software development and having tools that allow us to operate inside these complex tool environments in a way that allows us to bridge across the regulatory boundaries. And so next session on Thursday of next week, we're going to talk specifically about a lot of the medical device topics. So how is it we develop risk in the context of our requirements and our controls? How are those risks developed into our design control? And not only that, but how do we make decisions about setting up a project, driven from standards in a way that allows us to have different configurations for different types of projects, but at the same time have reporting over the whole thing? How do we understand the traceability in these complex environments and assure that we have the traceability that's required from a regulatory standpoint? So our next session is going to be related to that, and I will just leave you with our Digital Health for All registration page here. So if anyone else is interested in participating in the discussion, I'd be more than happy to have them. So thank you so much for your time today, and with that, we'll let you go back to your lunch. So thanks again.